Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome back again, and today we are going to talk about a topic around React Query. React Query is one of my most favorite library out there after React.js. I've been using React Query for a while, and I must say the kind of feature that it offers, it actually reduces a lot of coding load from your head. Very recently, I was part of an international conference called React Nexus in India, and that's where I have given a talk. Is React Query really needed? I know the title of the talk sounds a little controversial because just now I said I love React Query and now I am asking whether React Query is really needed or not. Let's dive into them and try to understand the perspective from where React Query can solve your problem and what are the factors that this kind of doubts are coming in our mind. We'll also try to address, even if you have the doubts, what are the ways you can clarify that and then move on doing the things which is right for you, right for your application. So in this video, we'll be coding less, unlike many other previous videos, but we are going to get some architectural overview and deep dive with lot of concepts around React Query and a few fascinating things that React introduced recently. So let's get started. So as we are getting started with the debate of React Query, whether it's really needed or not, let us look into React Query at a bird's eye view. React Query is now known as Tastack Query, and it is a library for asynchronous state management. When we are talking about asynchronous state management, we can break this particular phrase into two words. One is called asynchronous, and the second one is, of course, state management. What exactly asynchronous mean? Asynchronous operation means that doesn't halt or stop JavaScript's main execution thread. JavaScript by default synchronous, we know, but asynchronous operations are like you are fetching a data from the server or doing some kind of IO operation. Those are all asynchronous operation. You are not stopping or pausing or halting the main execution thread. On the other hand, state. What exactly state? State is the value of your application or component at the current time. If you are working with React, you already know what does state mean. Is the private value of your component. That's what get confined within your component. But if two components wants to talk to each other, they talk through props. Asynchronous state management means managing the value or managing the current data or managing the state of your component or UI out of an asynchronous operation. Think about a case, there is a network call happen or there is an IO operation happen. Out of all this, you have to manage the state, whether the state of your component become loading to error to a success state, data change state, whatever it is, you have to manage the state in your component, thus manage the state for your UI. Traditionally, we have been doing this with use effect, isn't it? In our React application, we write use effect, we write state for loading, we write state for error, we write state for getting the data out of the server response, and then we put that into our JSX so that the updated data, updated value get captured and our component start responding to that. But React Query makes things a little bit different. How? Traditionally, we have seen React Query as a data fetching library, but React Query is beyond data fetching library. For data fetching in React, use effect is probably enough at this point of time. But you will be using React Query for much more other things. What are those? Those are easily caching, deduping, managing your stale data, data update, performance optimization, memory optimization, all these things. But what are those and why do you need it? For example, you're fetching some data from server and your client needs to be updated. Now, what if you have a cache in between and your data get cached, and as and when the data updates on the server, your cache also gets updated automatically. Thus, your UI also respond to that. This particular mechanism almost give you a feeling of a real-time data update for your application. We're going to see a demo in a while. Deduping, another case. When you are making a fetch request, at the same time, if the same fetch request has been made, then how do you make sure that you are not making the duplicate request, thus not getting the duplicate response? How do you make this as a unique request response scenario? That's where the deduping come into picture, and React Query takes care of it by default. Along with that, there are performance optimization, they're managing memory, and all these things happen and taken care by React Query. One another thing that is a big bonus for all the developers and for the dev life, with React Query, definitely you write less code. And we all know that less code means less bugs. How many of you have seen this code? If you're a React developer, you have seen this code for sure. This is a simple use effect, maybe a shorter version or slim version of an use effect, where we are actually doing some state update. we are doing a loading state update and then making a fetch call, a call over the network. This is an asynchronous call. So out of this asynchronous call, we have to manage the state of this particular component. So the state here is set products. That means there is a state for managing the products. Assume that it returns an array of products. We are just setting the state using the value of the product that we're getting out of this fetch request. And if there is an error, then we also manage it through set error. And their loading indicator gets started in the beginning, and after everything takes place, we have the set loading over there. Now, this kind of code is quite usual. We are writing this day in, day out in the React. But if you notice quite deeply, this use effect that you see on your screen is not complete. There may be few other conditions, there may be few other areas you still need to make this use effect working better. You need some extensive scenario for managing state when you're making the fetch call, so that it is not going out of those corner scenario. You have to manage this loading indicator state by yourself, and also after getting the data, you also to make sure that you do some kind of distinguishment between a data that you are receiving versus data is intentionally made null, or you are not getting data because of some kind of network error. So there are many kind of corner cases you have to take care within the use effect itself. Today, this is easier, but still lot of work. What React Query produces straight away. First thing, a very less code. The above use effect can be replaced with whatever you're seeing at the bottom. The code what you see over here is pretty less and lean. Let me explain to you very quickly like what is this code doing. We are using a hook from React Query called useQuery. And here we're using a query key called products. This can be any name. If you give a name over here with this name, for this particular data, the cache will be managed and maintained. So later point of time in your application, you'll be able to track through the cache data for this particular query at a later point in time. We are going to see that in a demo in a bit. And then there is a query FN through which you can tell which asynchronous function call is going to get you this data, so that data can be cached, and later using the use query you can actually pull it and make it a synchronous effort. Now it returns this products data. This products data is coming from the cache, and the cache is being updated from an asynchronous call, which is a function called getProducts, which is making a fetch call like this at the background. Let's assume that. Now you don't get only products. Along with this, you also get loading and the error. Now those things you were managing separately by yourself using the state. You had a state called set loading. You had a state called set error. Now in this case, you don't have to manage stuff through state at all, because what you're getting back is the end loading value, end error value, and end products value. If there is any update happen in your cache, you get the updated products value, updated loading value, updated error value. Isn't that really awesome? And if you just compare the number of lines of code, even in this state, it is pretty less. Now let's look into the React Query architecture at a very high level. And I have also given a link in the description of this video, the article which is very beautifully written by the maintainer of React Query, and this screenshot that I'm going to show you is taken from that article itself. But let me explain in my way at a very high level. Here goes the architecture of React Query. The orange part that you are seeing at the bottom, assume that this is your application. Now, React Query has become Tastack Query. That means the library can be used beyond React. You can use it with Slate and other libraries. But for a moment, assume that this is your React application. And in the React application, you have something called a component. Just before this screen, you have seen a code snippet where you have seen use query. And there I was using a query key, something called a product. And here in this example, it is a post. Now, this is where it will identify or relate to the kind of data that you are getting from the external storage and caching it, so that later point of time it can find that particular data state using this particular key internally. Now how all these things happen? There will be a query client at the React Query level, and there will be a query provider that we have to use in our component or in our application. Okay. Now this particular provider provides the query client to us that we get over here. And then query client also holds something called a query cache. This is where React Query is very powerful and very awesome. With only React, you are missing this, or if you need this, you have to build it by yourself. React Query is giving this query cache, where this query cache can sync with any other external persistent storage. It can be your database, it can be your external storage, it can be your local storage, can be web workers, can be IndexedDB, or whatever it is you can think of. Now in this query cache, where your queries will live, and then you will have something called a query observer. which will have a pub sub model along with your component. So that means if certain data changes in your external storage, the sync will bring the update to the query cache, and as there is an observer which is looking into this update with the pub sub model, as soon as the update is available, it is going to inform your component and your component will be auto updated. Isn't it awesome? So you yourself were making an use effect usually from a React component. From here you fetch the data, but if there are some changes into your data model or there are some changes into the cache, the things were not quite automated to make sure that your components always getting updated data until otherwise you refresh your browser or refresh your component. In this case, there is a pipeline which is already established through which you already get the updated data into your component and you be happy as a developer. You can read about from this article. I have given this article link into the description of this video. Let's see a quick demo of React Query. What you see on your screen is a simple application which lists out a bunch of products. So you can see few mobile, and then below there is a pagination where clicking on next you can go to next pages and can browse this particular product. And then you also have one add product panel, and using this you should be able to add another product. Now what I'm going to show you over here, please notice I'm going to open the same app in another tab, and over here I'm going to do next, and going to go to the last page. Coming to the first page, I'm going to add a product over here now. Now the beautiful part of it is the moment I add this product and the product appear over here in this last page, I will go to this tab and without any refresh, I'll be able to see that product added over here. Awesome, isn't it? So let's add my favorite Sony A7 camera. Great camera. I wish to buy one. One day I earn money. And then some price of it maybe, and then put some image and then do add. The moment I do add, I see this guy over here, right? Now, if I go to my other tab where I won't be loading anything, see? The moment I come over there, I also get to see it over here. So this is great. And also along with this, I get a specialized debugger from React Query through which I can do a lot of stuff. You remember, I was talking about a particular key through which the cache is being managed. You can see that key over here. In this case, the key name is products, which we are going to see in the code in a while. Now seeing here, you can also see there is a number 1. This number 1 indicates how many observers you have from React Query cache to your component. I have only 1. Okay. Now over here, there are few state you can actually play around with. For example, I can go to any of this query, find out what is the query key. In this case, it is products. Then can go to this data, can go to this particular data and delete it. See, I have deleted a data. I can delete more data. You can also check like how each of these options are working. For example, I can even invalidate the cache. That means my stale cache is going to go away. So here it is showing the stale is 1. The moment I do invalidate, okay, so it becomes 0 and then become 1. I got my data back. I can also check like different scenario when loading happen. If I trigger loading, you see it's saying that fetching products. I can also trigger an error scenario and see this is a network error scenario and I can restore this. So there are a lot of stuff you can do through this particular dev tools where you can manage your query and data much closely. Now let's take a look into the code quickly. This is where I think is going to blow your mind a lot. So this is something I have showed you, this particular code. You have use query, you have a query key, and then you have a query function. I told that use query not only returns the data, along with that it also returns the error and is loading. So you won't find any use effect at all in this component or in this application. Everything is managed by just these 3-4 lines of code. Now here this retrieve products is an asynchronous function that I have at the top, which is making an access or fetch call to get me the products from the server. In this case, it's a local JSON server that I am running. So this is it for getting the products and then making everything is in sync. Now the part where I'm adding a product details and immediately is appearing over there, how is it happening? That also a few lines of code. Just like use query, it also has something called use mutation. Mutation means when you want to add, update and delete. There I'll be making a post call, of course, because it is about add, update or delete. I'm doing a post call. Once the post call happening, I'm just saying that, hey, using the React Queries query client, I invalidate the queries. It is invalidating the cache. Invalidating the cache means in the cache, if you have a stale data, you revalidate and fetch the refreshed data into your cache so that your UI also can get served. Have you seen what is being passed in the invalidate queries? Same that key that we have seen in the debugger in a while back, which is keep tracking of your data in the cache. So this is it, React query. There are a lot of other APIs, a lot of other optimizations possible, but at a high level, if you want to just get rid of all your use effect, all your data fetching, and want to bring in data fetching plus caching plus performance plus everything, React query is number one choice. But then, my friend, something happened. Something has got introduced into React. You guess what? It's called server components. To be very specific, React server components. And React 19, and just before that, the Next.js 13.x, and then the 14.x, which is rightly running, and the 15RC, which is also there, all actually going gaga about React server components. Now, React server components and the React query, when they both are existing in the landscape, the picture is changing a bit. That's where we're going to take a little bit deeper dive and try to find out the answer. Is React queries really relevant in the era of React server components? So what is React server components? Let's take a look at it at a high level. So a regular client server thing is what? You have a client and you have a server. And then from client, you make a request to your server, you get the response back, you make a request, you get the response back. That's at a high level very much what a client server programming is. Now, if it is a client side rendering alone, again, you have the client components. The client components are like that. In this case, I have a course wrapper component. Inside the course wrapper, I have a course list and the testimonial component. Let's assume that course wrapper, course list, and testimonials, all three components make asynchronous call over the network. Now, can you really guarantee that how much time it might take if you make a request over the network and to get back the response? You cannot. It depends on various different things. For example, your network speed, how long your service is taking at the server to compute, all these things, the latency and everything together, right? Now, let's assume that the course wrapper, the call is making, the fetch call is making, is going to take a little longer than the testimonial component, which is a child component inside it. So here course wrapper is the parent component, testimonial is the child component. Course wrapper call takes a while to come back, testimonials call happen quite faster. Now if I want to depict this here, so this is the course wrapper and this is the testimonial. Now what will happen? There are server over here. Now course wrapper will make a request, but the response is coming quite slowly. Then testimonial will go and make the request and it will come back very fast. But testimonial won't be rendered until unless course wrapper's call is complete and then that particular component finishes is rendering, because testimonial is a child component of course wrapper. Now this is introducing a classic problem which we call is a network waterfall and introduces high latency. So you will be seeing some kind of sluggishness. You will also might see in some cases that your UI is jumping around, and that is where React Server Components playing its role. I have a dedicated video which is talking about React Server Components quite internally, its benefits, and building an application using Mongo and Next.js. In the same video, go ahead and check it out. The video link is in the description of this particular video as well. So at a quick glance, how React Server Components taking things ahead. Again, the same client, again, you have those components, again the server. But in this case, instead of this particular component residing in your client, I am moving this component towards the server. So these components are now residing to the server, co-located or near to your data store, so that whenever you make a request, all the computation of data fetching, getting it back, data fetching, getting it back happen on the server itself, and then the finally all baked component along with the data and the structure and the UI is what is coming to you and gets rendered together. So here you don't have that network fall. Here you don't have all those latencies and everything that you were seeing. And also other advantages being that you are not loading lot of dependencies that are required only on the server side. So your JavaScript bundle and everything is also very much reduced. So it means that the React Server component is also going to help you a lot with your SEO. So are you getting a notion where you think that the React Server component is doing all the job of data fetching, keeping your component updated with the data, and finally pushing your component baked with the data into the client so that you can use the final product. Isn't it awesome? Isn't it something that React Query was also promising to do? That in the server, if there is a data change, your client is already updated with the data and you have the final outcome already there without you proactively again making the call and everything. So, do you think this is the case? That slowly Davis started feeling that the power of React Query is diminishing because right now React Server components available through React or Next.js. A while back, the maintainer of React Query himself shared this thought with us. I've been following both the maintainer of the React Query and React Query very closely, very fond of them. And this particular tweet says very clearly that, not gonna lie, that as a maintainer of the library in the data fetching space, I am feeling mostly afraid of server components and suspense. How will this work with React Query is a good question. It feels like I am supposed to have an answer, but I don't. Huge imposter syndrome right now. So this was sent on 2022, where when the React Server component was probably RFC or was just coming up. But things have changed a lot between 2022 to 2024. There are a lot more clarity have been imposed or found out or figured out through which we have the answers, a lot more answers today. Can we say that is there any situation where React Server component and the React query can stay together? We'll be finding an answer for that. But the problem that Dominic was mentioning, that can React query and React Server components stay together? There could be gotchas. So this is a question, I think, more than technical, is at the architecture level, and that is what is also quite well depicted in the React Query documentation. So this is the latest documentation I have pulled out. If you see there, it is clearly saying if you just starting out with a new server component app, we suggest you start out with any tool for data fetching your framework provides you with, and avoid bringing React Query until you actually need it. It also says this might be never, and that's fine. Use the right tool to do this job. Now, this particular statement, I think, confused many developers. This particular statement somewhat misleaded to the fact that React Query is no more required at all. But I read it a bit differently. It is clearly saying that data fetching part of it. It is not saying there are many other things that are possible at the client component level where React Query can still become handy. This statement you can still read from this particular link. Again, the link is in the description. But the misinterpreted version of this particular statement is that React Query is not gonna serve anymore because we have React Server component. That's not true. If you are doing data fetching part and you're using React Query only for data fetching, and you have a need of server component in your application, only in that case probably you don't want to use React Query, because when you're using server component, the server component is cooked, baked, everything on the server. It has nothing to do with client. Client is where you need the interaction. That is why the React Query is fundamentally correct, because it can play with the cache, keep things up to date. You want to see a demo? On your screen, you're seeing Mongo Compass, which is a UI for MongoDB. And I have a collection called users under the Tastack database. Here I have 3 users. So you see these 3 users also fetched, and it is shown on the UI. Here the UI is done using Next.js, where I have a server component and the client component both, which we'll see that in the code in a while. The server component part is this particular part where I'm showing the number of users, and the client component part is where I'm listing the users. Very common scenario in any application where you can have both server component and the client component in Next.js, and of course in future in React 19 as well, not in future, even now in React 19 RC as well. So this is great. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this database again, and I'm going to clone this last record. I'm going to create one more. So I clone it, and I'm going to give a name called Tom D, and then going to change his email, say tom@email.com, and I'm going to do this insert. The moment I insert it, you see this Tom D have come here. Now let's go back to UI. The moment I come to the UI, I see this has got auto refreshed. There were 3, and I see Tom D is also got added. But hang on, there is a problem. I don't see this number of users has not changed from 3 to 4. Now for this change to happen, I have to go and refresh my browser. Then only I'm seeing that change happen from 3 to 4, but the number of elements were already changed to 4. Now this is to showcase a scenario where you would have architected your solution in a different way, and you are relying on React query to update things on your server component, whereas server component is behaving or supposed to behave in a completely different way. Let's get into the code. So here is the code. This is the server component, the page, where I'm using this fetch query. I'm using this fetch query, and after using the fetch query, I am getting these users. This users is coming from this get user list. There is an asynchronous function that is hooking into Mongo and getting the user list. All right. Now, after getting the users, I'm showing this user.length over here. But this is a server component. It has nothing to do with client. Even if you do a fetch query, your cache that remain on the client has nothing to do with the server component that remain on the server. So this guy is never ever going to get updated. And that's the reason when you are actually relying on these users, this users is always going to be stale until and unless you refresh your browser hard. React query is not going to change this. On the contrary, there is a user list. That is a client component. And here again, I'm using the same use query. I'm using the same get user list, and then I'm getting the data, and this is the data I'm looping through and doing this ULLI to show user over there. But great part over here, this is getting synced properly because it is at the client side. So you understood the problem, that how server component, client component coming together, and how I'm using use query, trying to use it in both server component and the client component, and one portion of the UI is not really synced with the other portion of the UI. Now, this problem is happening not because the React query is at the fault. It is because we are trying to use something together which are not supposed to work in this way. It is with the architecture of this application that we are thinking about. So here my considerations are that your app may not be only about React Server component. You will have, or you may have, or most likely you are going to have, there are certain components which are client-side component. And the second thing, the React query is not just about the data fetching and mutations. It does more than that. For the data fetching, of course, React Server component is great. You can fetch all the data using React Server component. For mutations, you can use the server action. That's again another inclusion is React, and it is already there in Next.js as well. But in your application, if there are client components, they might need a few more use cases as well. So what are the possibilities? Let's say you have a server component and you have a client component. So on server component, you can always prefetch the data, right? That's what we say in Next.js. And that data, the prefetch cache can exist, and the data can be passed to the client component. On the client component, you can use React query, use query API, and many other API to perform many other operations like infinite scroll, the pagination, offline data, interval fetching, auto refresh. All this functionality of React query you can leverage. See, that's what I told, that your application may not be always about server component. And again, React query is not just for data fetching. There are more to it. You can have something like you are actually loading the first page of the data using server component. It loads very fast, and the subsequent load of your data using infinite scroll or pagination, that's where the use query or the React query kicks in and it start working. This is another tweet from the maintainer of React query again, where he asked publicly, like, what are the other use cases that's where React query can be very handy. I am sure that you would like to look into this thread and see what kind of things that people are coming up with and what are the use cases that they are actually talking about. Someone is talking about with web workers, someone is talking about maybe IndexedDB. So there are various ways that where React query can still be relevant along with React Server component, be it React.js, be it Next.js. So I hope this was useful to you and you don't make just one point solution just by hearing from people saying that, hey, this is alive versus this is dead. There will be use cases, there will be considerations, and there will be situations where your architecture may need certain versus other thing. So you have to take this call based on use cases, not by judgment. So I hope the React query keep rocking in many years to come and stay as relevant as it was along with all other paradigms of programming that are coming like React Server component. But we need to be truthful to ourselves. We need to be cognizant about the fact that where to use what and when certain things are going to solve certain use cases, not the same medicine for all the problems. So guys, if you liked it, please post a like. And if you have comment, please post your comment below. And please don't go away without subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much for watching my video. Keep learning, keep sharing.